Hey, Rebecca, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for joining us on the Geekcentric podcast. I'm excited to chat with you and learn a little more insight around your role and what you do at Pixar. And kind of want to actually just start there. You're credited as story artist,
Mhm.
and I'd love to know a little bit more about that, but almost in a fun way. There's always that motif of understanding your friends and your family think you do one thing and versus what you actually do. So, what do your friends and family think you do versus what you actually do, and how would you describe what you do?
My friends and family mostly still live in Canada, so I think they imagine that I sit outside in the California sun and don't do anything all day. That seems to be
Sweet
my
life.
impression of what they think my job is.
Okay, and as a story artist, what is that role? What does that role actually look like?
So a story artist's job is to take the first visual swing at the movie. So in practical terms, what that means is I'll get a script page or several script pages from the director and the writer of the movie, and then
Mhm.
I will kind of disappear into a dark office for several days and just do hundreds and hundreds of these very rough sketches where I sort of visualize like, okay, this is what this movie is going to look like. These are the shots we're going to use. This is the flow of the scene. Uh, the performance, the very first pass at the performance choices, that kind of thing. And then I do all that work, and then I come back like a week or two later, and I pitch that back to the director. And my goal is to say, this is what it could look like if we put in all the time and effort to animate this fully. It could be this. So yeah, and then I do that on loop for 3 years.
So it's basically creating like a visualization of what the movie would actually be. I guess
Yeah.
it's a little bit more than just storyboarding. Or is it more or less kind of, oh, it is okay.
Mhm.
So then there's more layers to it. There's more, I think, more definitive, like sort of choices that are made, I imagine, in terms of like camera angles and or choices of how it would visually look. That's really amazing.
Yeah.
How did you find yourself in this role? Was there experience outside? Was there any inspirations or movies that might have inspired you to want to get into this field of animation and story artists?
I'm one of those people who, as a child, I watched the making of documentaries for Pixar movies more than I watched the films themselves.
Yeah.
I was so just at an early age fascinated by watching people the videos of like the filmmakers here just like zipping around the studio on scooters and like
Hmm.
going to animation and giving notes on things. And I was like, I will do anything to be a part of that world.
Yes.
I need to get there. Um, and I already had a love of drawing and storytelling. So, without really knowing that I would end up in this role exactly, I did just know that I wanted to be involved in animation.
Hmm. That's awesome. That's fantastic because it's a medium that is becoming more than just a genre, right?
Hmm.
It's really broadening, and obviously with a studio like Pixar that is so innovative and so they're so forward thinking in terms of like the storytelling and the marriage between storytelling and animation. It seems like it would be a great fit for yourself to kind of be creative. And speaking of Pixar, was there any particular movies that you were really like you always really drawn to that really spoke to you?
Well, when I was younger, my favorite Pixar movie was, and continues to be, my favorite Pixar movie is A Bug's Life. I go back to
Yeah.
that movie so often. I think it's so funny. I think it's like 2 decades old now. It's still
Hmm.
so funny and so good. I just love
Yeah.
it.
Yes, I feel like it's one of those ones that might float off of people's radars because it's not
Mhm.
necessarily one of those, there's always different tiers, right? So
Yeah.
people will always go to the Toy Story or the Monsters Inc. or the Finding Nemo, but Bugs Life, I definitely think, and it captures that cleverness. Again, we're talking about Inside Out too, and you playing a part in that and bringing the story to life. Um, when you think about the emotions, is there a specific emotion that you can relate to? Maybe one that's behind your console, if you will, that's driving.
Hmm. I think I vacillate between anxiety and ennui. Those are my two states.
What emotion was that?
That's ennui. On what?
Ennui. It's what you would call the boredom.
I like that. Ennui is,
If I'm not heightened at a 10, I'm asleep. Uh,
yeah. So you need to be engaged, and when that engagement happens, it can bring in some anxiety with so much. you know, that your role might ask of you, and again, you go through these waves of really just focusing on your work. What do you do when you want to unwind, when those emotions get really, really hot? You know, what is it that you do to kind of chill out?
Because my job is drawing, you might not think this, but I just draw. I still just love it so much. It's sort of
Mhm.
like still my safe place that I go back to when I'm trying to unwind. I find it just very meditative, very soothing.
Yeah.
That's where I return to every time.
I love that. I love that. You still find the opportunity to, you know, keep engaging. What do you like to draw though, outside of maybe the stuff that is more, I guess, formulated or traditional to what Pixar does? Is there specific things that you do? Do you paint? Do you do any other things outside of the artistry of story artists?
I love to go people watching and people drawing. So I'll just go sit in a park and I'll just sketch people as they walk by, sketch people just, hanging out. There's something really nice about just being able to observe and, keep a small
Wow.
memory of a day in a book.
Right. Watching life unfold
Yeah.
and capturing that in your art,
Yes.
which is really, really cool. I love that. You know, in regards to this project and Inside Out, is there anything specific that you are personally proud of that you brought to this film and to this project?
Yeah, I worked quite a bit on in the early film and throughout, I guess. I worked quite a bit on the development of Riley's belief system. That was sort of a sequence that I put a lot of work into and had to return to several times.
Mhm.
But I'm really proud of how that turned out and of how much I feel like I can still see my handprint on it. So that's definitely something I feel pretty proud of.
That's awesome. And with that, I guess on the flip side, were there any challenges as well? You know, because obviously there's a lot of moving parts to this an animated film. There's so many people behind the scenes, and there's probably constant changes. Were there any challenges that you and your team and yourself had to overcome?
Ooh, I think working on a sequel is a challenge in itself. There's the pressure of having to live
Of
up to the
course.
expectations of it is such a beloved film. Inside Out is
Mhm.
such a beloved world. Um, so I did feel a little bit of pressure to make sure that I was always delivering my best work and that I never put out anything that I didn't think was good. And there's also, kind of the blessing in that of, this is, hey, in the same breath, this is a much beloved world and these are
Mhm.
beautiful characters that people like and I get to play with them. So I don't know. It was kind of a challenge, but also kind of like oh, what an
A
interesting
rewarding.
challenge. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like it was a challenge, but a rewarding challenge at the end of the day,
Yes.
where you really get
Mhm.
to look back at this work and reflect on it. You know, you kind of already touched on my last question here, but I'd love to hear maybe more in depthly. But you know, I was fortunate enough to talk with Peter Sohn and ask him this question as well in regards to, you know, Pixar is seen as a studio with such a vibrant culture. For yourself, what is it that makes working at Pixar so special for you?
Oh, the people, 100% of the time, every day. I'm still excited to come to work every single day, even on days when it's tough and there's a lot of challenges ahead, because all of the people I've met at this job are such extraordinary creatives in themselves. Each person here is such a competent filmmaker in their own right, and they have such strong creative visions and opinions that anytime I'm feeling creatively drained or if I'm feeling not very inspired, I can just talk to anybody here and they'll show me what they're working on and it's back.
Wow, that's awesome. That's again, I going back to what you said before, wanting to be there, wanting to work there. Every time I hear any insight about it, it's just like I'm exactly where you are, Rebecca. I want to figure out how to get there at some point and see it, experience it, because it really does feel like a special place. And this movie is very special. Congratulations to you and the entire team. And yeah, thanks again for joining us on the Geekcentric podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Have a good one, Rebecca.
You too.
Bye. Hey, Scott, how are you doing, man?
I'm doing great, Justin. Thanks. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for making the time to join us on the Geekcentric podcast. It really means a lot to get a little more insight into this film. I saw Inside Out 2 yesterday, and I absolutely adored it. It continues the emotional impact, but also the visual style is obviously very continuous from the first movie. Now, you've been credited as simulation lead, so I
Yes.
thought maybe for our listeners and viewers, we might be able to elaborate a little bit more on that. And I was actually going to kind of position in a fun way. You know, there's always this thought of what your friends and family think you do versus what you actually do. So, what do
Sure.
your friends and family think you do versus what you actually do, and how would you describe a simulation lead?
I think some friends and family definitely have the misconception that I either animate characters, maybe even voice a character, or just make the whole movie myself. Sometimes it can be pretty funny hearing the ideas that they have. But as a simulation lead, the simulation department deals primarily with hair and clothing on characters. So
Okay.
adding the motion and bringing them to life on any characters that we have in scenes that are already animated by our team of animators.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really cool. It gives it more life in a lot of ways, right? It's getting into the new like the sort of nuance of the characters themselves.
Exactly, exactly. And we try to take whatever animation's intention is for a character, whether it's a quiet moment or an active moment,
Mhm.
and plus it some way or the other, either amp it up or maybe add subtle wind or add like crazy motion to a dress or something like that to really bring to life the accessories on a character and the things that make you feel that the world is alive.
Right. And it just goes to show how many layers go into animation to really, again, as you said, bring things to life so that, it doesn't just feel like it's just moving pictures, but there's so much behind the scenes and within the scene that really does give you this like sort of lifelike feel. Um, you know, working for Pixar, and Pixar is known for innovating and bringing new technologies and new processes to the animation field. Were there any new innovations or technologies developed for this film, and how were they leveraged if they were?
Sure. I think for this film, at least limiting it to the simulation department, we found that the character itself of anxiety
Mhm.
brought a set of new challenges to the film, where her hair isn't just an accessory in this case; it's actually almost a secondary character to her, adding emotion and vibrancy to her life and acting in the scene. So our team developed a way to not just pose the hair into different shapes and poses, but to actually bring it to life through some pretty clever behind the scenes work, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I remember when Peter Sohn had come to Toronto to talk about even Elemental, and just the idea of the effort that the team puts into kind of imagining specific elements and how they react, and how they move. That's what brought up the question of, every Pixar movie feels like it's really pushing the boundaries. Even though we might be familiar with this world, it does feel like there's some new elements and emotions at play that really do kind of bring new technologies and new ideas to the table.
Sure, sure. And I think when you're comparing it to something like the original Inside Out, which, as
Mhm.
you mentioned, this film does look visually similar, technology has advanced quite a bit since the first movie.
Right.
And as much as it might seem easy to just replicate what we did, 9 years ago, technology has changed so much that we need to almost invent new technologies to do things an old way. So getting all the
Interesting.
little particles on a character that we see, I think that needed to be reinvented for the new technology that we're using here.
Well, that actually brings up a question that I had that is sort of like a bonus question, but I think it's perfect to actually ask here. You know, how would you describe what are the characters made of in your mind? Like, because they do look particle based, but then there's also like hairs and textures as well that kind of obviously give definition. How would you describe what they're physically made up of?
Sure. That's a question that we've asked each other while making movies, and
Awesome.
I think that the best way we could describe it is they're made of your own imagination. They're composed of light. They're composed of your feelings. They're composed of whatever you have as an internal idea of what maybe your anger is represented by, or your joy, or even maybe just your own fashion sense, depending on
Mhm.
which character's head we're looking into.
Now, speaking of which characters' heads we're looking into, I'd love to take a moment here. We are talking about Inside Out 2. I'm not sure if you've asked this. It seems like an easy question, but is there an emotion that you connect with? Is there emotion that you find is running your headquarters on the constant?
Yeah, well, I mean, I love anger. I love his animation. I love the way he reacts to everything. But I wouldn't say he's driving my console personally. I can
For
relate
sure.
to some of the things he thinks. But I think my console is a mixture of joy and anxiety a lot of the time. I think that I can overthink things and find joy when things work out.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel the same way. I I feel like even in this movie, as it talks about these two new, you know, joy in relation to anxiety, in the previous movie with sadness and joy, you really do see that there's such a relationship between the two, and that there's a constant shift. Like, I'm a father now, and so I feel like I'm you know, anxiety is constantly driving my head console. So you know, I can relate to some of those moments as well. You know, being with Pixar, I'm sure you've seen a lot, and you've been a part of a variety of different teams. Is there a specific Pixar film that you have really connected with, that is sort of like a driving force for yourself in terms of like the imagination, the creativity, and everything that exists in that?
Sure. I think, going back to the original Toy Story, that was something that when it came out, it blew my mind. And
Hmm.
the idea that you can make something that looks so good, and tell such a strong, powerful story, is just something that stuck with me. And it's one of the movies that really made me decide that maybe I could get into this. Maybe I could help make stories like this that impact people and make them say, "Wow, I can't believe you could bring that to the screen."
There's so much that goes into production. It can be sometimes a crazy schedule, crazy day. For yourself, what do you do to kind of bring yourself back to a sense of norm and simplicity when things get really hectic, and maybe all the emotions you're feeling during a project or on a specific day?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it can absolutely get busy and hectic during the project. I think the best way for me to unwind is just to connect with friends and family, just to have something that's not connected to work, people who know me, who can, even if I'm, on a level 10 of anxiety, that they talk to me and they understand me, and we can just have a good time regardless of anything that I might be feeling, or they might be feeling. Just an understood acceptance of each other, and winding down in that way.
Yeah, that's great. You know, your family, friends, they can always be a great resource to kind of bring you back down when you're feeling all the different emotions or feelings from a day. And I love that. I again, having a daughter, I feel like if I have had a busy day, spending time with her, it brings me back down to a sort of simplistic norm.
Yeah.
Um, you know, my last question, I asked this of Peter, when he was in Toronto, and I'd love to get your take on it too. But again, Pixar is seen as a studio with such a vibrant culture. I want to know for yourself, what is it about Pixar that makes working there so special? And for yourself, like, what has been a driving force of why you love working there?
Well, I've worked at multiple places before coming to Pixar, and the thing that I felt immediately when I joined here was a sense of collaboration and community that I really didn't necessarily get at every place I've been before.
Hmm.
The people at Pixar are all so kind and caring, and there's this sense of teamwork, that everybody wants to work towards a common goal of making a great movie, telling a great story, and just knowing that if you run into a problem, you've got people in your department and every other department is willing to help you figure it out, because everyone's just on the same page of trying to make a great story.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, community, collaboration, all key elements that you would expect from a studio like Pixar. And I love that because, you know, you can see it in the appreciation and love that, you know, comes from every movie. And you know, talking with fine folks like yourself that have the opportunity to work on these films. Scott, thank you so much for taking the time to join us again on the Geekcentric
Thank you.
podcast. Some great insight on your role and how you've brought this film to life. And again, I absolutely adored Inside Out too. So thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Have a good one, man.
Take care. Thanks.